So I just watched the Star Trek The Next Generation episode Relics for probably the first time in at least 5 years. And honestly, I had to stop at about 16 minutes in because I was having a visceral reaction to it. For those of you that don't remember, Relics is the episode where James Doohan reprises his role as Montgomery Scott. It's when the Enterprise encounters the Dyson Sphere, and they find Captain Scott trapped in the pattern buffer loop of his own transporter, and they essentially beam him onto the Enterprise, and the episode continues. I've talked previously about how I really enjoy rewatching episodes of Star Trek at various times in my life because I find that as I age, as I experience my own life more and have different emotional experiences, different relationships with people, that my response to certain episodes changes. And my response to this one surprised me so much that I actually had to stop the episode. At the beginning of the episode, after Scotty has returned to the Enterprise, Geordi is really complimenting him. He's kind of fangirling, if you will, over this idea that Scotty had to basically lock his transporter pattern into the pattern buffer in order to survive 75 years. But as the episode progresses, as it goes on, we see that Scott's presence on the Enterprise is a distraction. It's an annoyance because he's from a time where the Enterprise was run different. He's from Constitution class. He's not used to this new version of the Enterprise. He's trying to help, but really he's just getting in the way. And eventually Geordi has to stop him and say, like, look, you're not helping me. You're preventing me from being able to do my job. Thankfully, I've never worked at a single job long enough that I can consider myself as having... Thankfully, I have never worked at a single job long enough to basically find myself as obsolete. But I just had a very strong emotional reaction to that scene where Scotty essentially realizes that he doesn't have a purpose anymore and that all of the knowledge and experience that he had in the past doesn't help anyone. I work in a field where everyone is constantly trying to stay on top of the game, essentially. They're trying to be the best that they can be because the next new, young, fresh thing is always right there behind you. And the way this episode really makes you feel like you are in Scotty's shoes, like you know what it means to not be useful anymore, to be obsolete, to have everyone else running circles around you, that really struck a chord with me. As a young person watching this episode for the very first time, I was just excited to see old Trek and new Trek bridge together. I was so excited to see my favorite old chief engineer kind of join forces with the new chief engineer and see how that could bridge this gap between old Trek and new Trek at the time. But now as an adult, watching this episode, having had failures in my life, failures in my career, failures in relationships, it definitely had a completely different impact on me. And it was one that I really didn't anticipate, but I am glad for. One of the great things about Star Trek is that most of its episodes are timeless. There is a message there in every episode that hits different at different stages of life. I understood what they were saying as a young person watching this episode, but I didn't understand it from experience. And that is something I just really love about rewatching Trek. It's watching these same scenarios, these same stories, but with a different perspective. I also really appreciate that the writers of this episode decided to end it on a happy and positive note. They could have very easily gone the direction of Generations and had Scotty essentially sacrifice himself for the Enterprise D crew, and they decided not to do that, and I'm really glad that they went with that decision. Because it really leaves you with this hope that there is something for everyone out there, and even though you might be older and not accustomed to the new technology or the changes or the different ways that things are done, there is still the opportunity of building new relationships, making new friendships, and finding a new and or renewed purpose in your life. But I tell you what, getting through those first 16 minutes, that was a challenge.